So during pregnancy, particularly towards the end, deep squat movements can sometimes be kind of painful and cause pelvic girdle pain. So feeling pain here in the front of the pelvis at the pubic symphysis, or feeling pain in the back of the pelvis, usually like a deep glute pain on either side. If we're having pelvic girdle pain, it can make those deep squat movements pretty uncomfortable or borderline painful. But we want to be able to find movement patterns that are going to help open the top of the pelvis or the inlet. And those movements typically involve deep squats. So if we can't find this movement pattern, we may have some issues helping baby initially engage into the pelvis. So let's go over some tips to help us still be able to open the top of the pelvis, even if we can't do deep squats, and some strategies to help kind of overcome pain that we have with those deep squat movements, particularly with pelvic girdle pain. So one of the first things that we can do to help try to modify the movement so that it can become accessible to us, it's going to be to focus on pelvic positioning. So for some of us, our pelvis is slightly torqued in either direction, usually with the right hip more drived back. And this can make it a little bit more challenging for those pelvic joints to compress on themselves with movement. So if we're always stuck in this position, when we try to do certain movements such as single leg movements or even those deep squats, it can cause some pain. So the first tip is going to be to adjust the pelvic positioning to a more neutral position. So we can drive that left hip crease back just a little bit and emphasize adduction more on the left side. It can help bring that pelvis back into a more neutral position. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So the first thing that we can do to help adjust the pelvic positioning is we can think we have these two angles here for where my hip creases are. I want to think drive that left hip crease back. So typically the left hip sits a little bit more forward. This is exaggerated. So we want to take this left hip crease and drive it back. My legs are staying stationary. It's just my pelvis shifting on top of my femurs. So this is going to help me come into a more neutral pelvic position, which is going to allow my pelvic joints to have more forced closure on them. The next thing that we can do is we can emphasize adduction with our squats. So this is typically going to be more for during your workouts during pregnancy. This is not something that I would incorporate during labor by any means. So with adduction, what I'm trying to resist is my leg moving outward. So I have to adduct or focus on activating to keep my leg midline with the resistance band. Typically, it's going to be that left leg. So I can think drive that hip crease back. Now I have that adduction emphasis. So this leg is turning on a little bit more to keep me in this neutral position. And then I could do my squat. So I can think big inhale into my pelvic floor, into my lower back to lower down. And then exhale, lift on up. Inhale down. And then exhale, come up. So sometimes just adjusting the pelvic position can alleviate a lot of that pelvic girdle pain. Now, a tip for squatting throughout pregnancy, if you're having pelvic girdle pain, is sometimes coming into that wider stance can cause more issues rather than help, but we still need to make space for the belly as we come down. If the stance is too narrow, it's really going to decrease the range of motion or how deep that we can go while still maintaining that neutral spine. So a helpful thing that we can do is we can squat down to a box, but still maintain our more narrow stance. So when I have my more narrow stance and I come down to the box, I still have space for my belly, but I'm still kind of coming to a stopping point. And then exhale, come up, inhale, come down, exhale, come up. The box is also going to add a little bit of stability at the bottom of the movement because you can kind of pause there before you come back up to kind of reset yourself. We can also add that resistance band around that left leg to emphasize that adduction here. And then I have my box. I can inhale to come down, exhale to come up, and even think drive that hip crease back.